Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Hello, Libration Nation. This week we are discussing leadership with the groundbreaking book for managers, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And I'm discussing this book with my guest this week, Ira Holliday. Husband, father, avid golfer, and business strategist are several of the key attributes used to describe Ira Holliday. With over 25 years of Fortune 200 experience in the areas of digital transformation, HR services, and agile delivery, Ira has amassed quite the collection of business and leadership-focused authors within his library, including First Break All the Rules, a New York Times bestseller. This is a wonderful, so much fun in this conversation. Ira and his wife, Latoya, have become good friends of ours, and getting to know him and seeing his passion for leadership, I asked him if he would be interested in coming on to share some of the things that he's learned. When he said he wanted to discuss First Break All the Rules, I got so excited because it actually is a favorite of mine. If you don't know, outside the show, I've been a library manager for over a decade. And so a lot of the things that I practice in my management style, I can link back to reading First Break All the Rules when I was in graduate school. Our drink this week is an old-fashioned, but not just an old-fashioned. It is a smoked old-fashioned, which Ira introduced to me, and it's a traditional old-fashioned using a smoker kit, which gives it an additional layer, perfect for fall, and I'll put a link to the smoker kit in the show notes. All right, without further ado, let's get to it. I think that's all that we need to get into a little bit, and thank you for being here. I'm super excited to interview you about, and did I tell you First Break All the Rules? I read it. I've read it before, and then I reread about half of it to prepare for this. Perfect. Anyway, when you said this was what you wanted to read, I was like, it's happenstance.
Perfect. Perfect.
So I guess we'll just start with, Ira, who were you when you read First Break All the Rules?
When you initially had asked me to think about a book that I wanted to discuss on the podcast, of course, a ton of books started flowing through my mind. But I think what made your podcast special was about the moment that the book, the author, the content, and the reader came into this magic moment. And I started filtering out all these books. And in this particular moment, I remember being in undergraduate school, going through some of those uncertainties that I think that we all have, starting my first corporate venture with no real exposure to culture, no real exposure of what to expect outside of the academic books that you read. Mm-hmm. And they had this shelf of books in our service section, some fiction, some business books, but really heavy on leadership. Mm. And I can't remember if a mentor recommended it or I was just strolling through our little corporate library. But the title of the book really stood out to me because I was somewhat a rebel in my youth. So seeing the title was like, that's something that sounds interesting. During that time, I think I was uncertain. I was definitely unprepared for some of the challenges that I would face. And so that book, for me, helped to almost demystify certain aspects of corporate America, while at the same time helped me gain a little bit of focus and clarity on how I might navigate that landscape. Mm-hmm. Funny thing is, I was in a business role while pursuing an undergraduate degree in chemistry.
Oh,
I had plans to go off to dental school.
Oh, Oh.
But while I was working in this environment, and we'll get into it when we talk about the book, some of my talents started to shine through. And that book helped me really pivot and say, dental school is not for me. I'm going to shift my major completely and become a business professional, and I'm going to break the first rule.
And was that your rule that you were breaking first?
Yes, which was, this is the direction that I'm going to go, despite where my talents may have been pointing me towards. So I think that book helped give me a lot of peace of mind and kind of being a rule breaker in some of the ways that he outlined.
Yeah, so you were getting your chemistry degree.
Check.
Did you switch it at that point?
I did. Of course, after a significant amount of soul searching and reflection and discussion and going all in. So one of the things that the book really highlights is identification of talent. But what makes the book interesting, though, is he really is focusing on how managers and people leaders should help to organize and activate their teams. However, when I was reading it, I was interpreting it as how I can activate myself. And so it was almost like a blueprint for me of how I could follow those steps individually to understand setting the right outcomes, which was one of the 4 keys that he talks about in the book. Another one of them is investing in strengths.
Yes.
So instead of focusing on all the opportunities and weaknesses, which I'm sure I had a ton, and, in my first corporate role, I started to double and triple down on investing in those strengths, which helped me move into certain areas much more quicker than others.
Yeah. And so there's 4 traits of a strong manager, right?
Yep.
And let's talk about investing in strengths versus weaknesses, because to me, I'm a manager as well, small scale, but that's something I don't know if I cling to, but it really resonates with me.
Yeah. What I thought really stood out to me when I reread some of the highlights was how that book, which was delivered, I think, released in 1999, how so many of the concepts are what people are either aspiring toward within their organization or focused on today. So one, the book, I think, is timeless, and no wonder it's one of the New York Times bestsellers. But at the same time, those 4 keys or guides are just as relevant as they were when I was in undergraduate many eons ago as they are today.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah. So I read in graduate school, so 15 years ago at this point. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was from 99. But so many of the things that he talks about, nothing's changed.
It hasn't. And I actually put the 4 keys down, which was select for talent.
Right.
Define the right outcomes. Focus on strengths, not opportunities. Find the right fit. And so for me, when it talked about select for talent, I started to really think about what are the talents that I have and how can I proactively select the projects that are going to bring those talents to the forefront or help me hone those talents for define the right outcomes. I would be thinking in my mind whenever I got on a project, it was never about the person informing me what I needed to deliver. It was me proactively recommending these are the outcomes that I think we should achieve. For focus on the strengths, it was all about, hey, if they're going to pay for this certification, if they're going to send me off to this training, I'm going to eat it up to really get stronger.
Yeah.
And then for the find the right fit, it wasn't just because there was an opening in this area, I'm going to jump to that promotion. If that promotion was not going to help me showcase my talents, as he talks about in the book, it can lead you into a dead end. So really looking to find those opportunities that match your talents and your strengths can really help you propel your career forward. Which is probably in that moment of uncertainty, some of the things that I needed to hear
and to learn about. And so then what was the path that you went on after that moment?
I would say it was I wish the path was straight, but it was more like amazed. And I think with this book, sometimes the books will entertain you, sometimes they'll inform you, sometimes they'll bore you. But with this one, sometimes they'll change you or transform you. And I think what this book helped me to do was gain more patience in how I navigated my career path. So I was more selective with where I showed up and the opportunities that I pursued because of this book. And I think it helped me stay. I was an individual contributor when I read this book. So one, I could see the gaps between my manager and what the book was proposing. And then two, as I gained leadership experiences leading projects, even though I wasn't a people leader, I got to select the employees that were on the project. So I wasn't always selecting the highest performer to be on the project because it might have been a mid-level performer that had the talent that I needed to deliver. So what you end up finding was like my teams were far more diverse in terms of performance and skill sets than others, and we would always deliver far more than folks expected, much of which was based on the blueprint of those 4 keys that we discussed. So I think it almost gave me like a roadmap. I think when you're young in corporate America, it can be very misty in terms of what you should be doing. You rely very heavily on your managers and your peers. But I think there's a wealth of knowledge in some of these business books that can really help accelerate. And I feel like I've probably been addicted to them since I cracked his open. That's probably my primary genre. Like I tried to read fiction. I've tried to read autobiographies. They just don't grab me. But business and the establishment of organizations and the fall of great companies always seems to catch my eye.
So you are definitely like a business nonfiction reader. I think the Dewey Decimal is the 658. Have to be
you make my eyebrows sweat when you say that because today you just put it on your phone and you got whatever you need. But I remember those hours in the library, getting paper cuts, plucking through, getting your card.
Yes, I do want to go back because you were talking about talent.
Yes.
And you focus on talent when you're picking people to be on your team. And I think one thing this book brings up is that there is a belief, I think, with people who aren't great managers that there's some jobs that you don't need talent for, or that or they don't quite understand what it is. But they really talk about how everything is a talent that you have. Patience is a talent. Empathy is a talent. Attention to detail, all of those things.
Yes.
Does that resonate with you?
Oh, very much, very much. And I think that we are becoming more awoke to the power of talents. And the hard part is training people leaders to see them when they might not be obvious, and at the same time, for people that are talented, getting them to invest and sharpen them. Because oftentimes the talented at a certain level know they have it, and so they can become either complacent or it can atrophy. So trying to make sure that you're identifying that. And I think as a father, that's one of the things that looking back at it is, man, I don't know that I was thinking as much about what are those talents that my son has. I saw them as abilities, and typically talents show up in the athletic arena, I think, more than others. And in my mind, I always go, man, did I expose him to enough areas? Because that's also a really good way to uncover talents. Sometimes the talents are there, but that individual might not be in the right environment. And I think that's another thing for young or even seasoned professionals is like, how are you putting yourself in these positions where new talents might emerge that might have otherwise been suppressed because maybe the opportunity didn't present itself, maybe the challenge didn't have you step into the forefront, or maybe the team structure didn't allow you to take on those responsibilities. But I like that we're talking about it more, and I think where we are in society, we're starting to definitely still value formal education. But at the same time, we're saying formal education may not be as great of an indicator of talent. So let's broaden the pool of consideration, which I think is going to help us just have more opportunities to identify those that have certain talents, even though they might not have traditional education paths, which I think is great.
Yeah. And so going and talking about the book a little bit more, we already talked about, like, it's timeless, right? But I think the basis of it is the fact that it was based on considerable research, right?
Yes, over 100,000 employees were interviewed to gather some of the data and the case studies,
Yeah, and it was done by Gallup. So Gallup did a huge survey of employees and managers. And I'm not going to be able to remember them all, but there's 12 questions that they asked the employees about their work. And basically it started at the bottom of the hierarchy. Do you have the basic needs to get your jobs done? And then it got up to the top to, are you actually fulfilling it? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Again, going back to why this book was so impactful, what I think the book does very well, it lays out a very understandable framework with these keys, these 12 questions, and a couple of other areas where he goes deeper. But then he balances it with a really strong case of data. So this is not subjective.
Right.
Objective.
Very.
And I think the questions that are posed really get at the heart of what does it take to motivate and retain your top talent. Because the data really shows that it's top talent that really drives your organization and drives customer satisfaction. But one thing that's embedded in the questions is this sense of belonging, this value of inclusion that the majority of all employees seek. And again, this was in 99.
Yeah.
And he was already on the inclusion and belonging bandwagon to the point of quantifying it as an indicator of flight risk for top talent.
Yeah. And do you see that? So you are a manager, you're a business person. How do you see that play out when you see people who maybe don't feel included, or they don't feel like they have a friend at work, or their manager doesn't care about them, that kind of thing?
For individuals that may not have read the book, one of the questions is, I have a best friend at work, and you rate through 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And I think in looking at teams, what I think you'll find, and of course I haven't done the research, I think managers, and he stresses this in the book, that one of the primary responsibilities of the manager is creating the conditions or creating the environment where employees can thrive. And I think managers that have the highest performance in an organization over a sustained period of time, you will find that they invest heavily in inclusion. They invest heavily in cultivating a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
But some of that probably comes from their natural talent of empathy or connection. So they probably move above the metrics and really try to understand who is this individual at the individual level. What are some of their concerns? What are some of their needs? Going back to that Maslow's hierarchy, the best managers aren't going to lose sight of those levels, and they're going to pulse check on a reoccurring basis.
Do you have any anecdotes to share about, like, really strong managers and what you've seen this play out in your career?
Oh, yeah. I totally have. I think on the positive side, I've been fortunate enough to have some really good managers that have not only helped to put me in positions to showcase my talents, but even helped me understand what they were, especially early in my career. And on the flip side, I've had other managers that have directed you either into roles or opportunities that may have been either totally against your talents or, getting back to the inclusion and belonging, we're only looking for their report on Friday. And as long as they got their report on Friday, they were good, and you might not have heard from them for another 30 days.
Yeah.
And I think for those managers, they probably left chips on the table. And I think the book hits at the heart of that as well, which is when you miss those key areas of creating that environment and unleashing that talent, not only are you harming the organization because that person could be contributing more, you're also harming that individual who's not bringing as much of their abilities to work as possible.
Yeah. And thinking about it, like going back to making the environment, inclusion, all of those things, like where do you think the line falls on how much managers should care about their employees? Because I think as a manager, that's always a tough question. Is I can't be best friends with these people. They're not my family. Or are they? I don't know.
I'm from the camp of it's not family.
Yeah.
It's more team.
Yeah.
I don't think the book talks a lot about coaching, but I've done research on coaching, and I do think that good managers are really strong coaches.
Yeah.
Shout out to The Coaching Habit. But
is that a book?
Yes, The Coaching Habit.
The Coaching Habit.
Great book, The Power of Questions.
Okay.
And so getting back, I do think there isn't necessarily a line. There's probably more of a spectrum. And I think really strong managers, their floor on that spectrum is still going to be really high, which is like, I want to support in the vein of achieving this goal. I want to help you remove obstacles as they occur.
Yeah.
And if something is getting in the way, I want to establish enough trust that we can talk about it. I think like that's like the minimum floor. But then you also, we're human beings. There's a relationship component that I think everybody needs to navigate based on their comfort level. But I do think that relational currency is one thing that really strong managers know how to navigate. And you'll find that some put more on the table than others, but there's probably going to be a minimum level that all great managers contribute.
Yeah. I find that sometimes, and also shout out to our significant others who are clearly having a good time in the kitchen.
I think they're doing drinks in the family room. They've started another podcast.
So anyway, if the audio has them in the background, that's what that is. I did think sometimes we're talking about there's a minimum amount that good managers do to make that team work, because sometimes managers want there to be this black and white, there's no gray, and I just think this book goes against that. Of you can't really define what it's like to create a great environment, right?
From the book's perspective, with those 12 questions, you can quantify it.
Okay.
And I think those questions help you say, hey, if you're going to be a great manager, you want to be 4 to 5 in these areas, starting at the bottom of base camp.
Yeah, and so the bottom of base camp is, do I know what I have to do every day, and do I have what it takes to get it done?
You have really done a good job.
I've read it technically twice now, but that's the basis, right?
Yes, and then some of the other questions include, have I received recognition or praise for doing good work in the last 7 days? Does my supervisor or someone at work seem to care about me? Is there someone at work who encourages my development? And I think, going back to why this book was pivotal for me and why it came up, I started to do my own self-assessment on the environment that I was in and how my manager was showing up. And in areas that they were 5, which is the summit, I was like, great, this is where it needs to be. In the areas that was 2 or 3, I was proactively making recommendations to my manager of how they might be able to show up differently.
Yeah.
But I also was making note that when I got the opportunity to lead others, what they won't say is Ira doesn't reach the summit in creating inclusion. Ira doesn't reach the summit in creating belonging. Ira doesn't recognize me enough. Ira doesn't bring my talents forward. So it really helped me focus how I was going to lead teams, even when I didn't have formal authority. These might have been volunteer groups. This might have been employee resource groups. So it gave me a sense of direction on what I should aspire toward as a young leader.
Yeah, digging deep and going beyond what you're being asked to. And sometimes you can learn a lot from bad managers. You can learn more from a bad manager than a good manager.
Yeah. And this was the funny thing about it, because you took me back in time with this book and these questions, which was so much of it is not what you learn in the book. And so I felt a little bit like a fish out of water before this book had arrived, because when you don't know the secret sauce, you think it's magic. And so what First Break All the Rules helped me understand is there's a formula to this thing.
Okay.
And the great managers, yeah, they're great. But at the end of the day, if you unpack it, there are actionable steps that every people leader can take to be a great manager. And as individual contributors, there are actions that you can take, like I mentioned earlier, to showcase your talents, to make sure you're fitting in the right spaces, that you're investing in your strengths.
Yeah. I do want to tell, I had an employee, I'm not going to say when, but I had one who...
No names.
No names, no times, no nothing. Who requested a meeting with me and basically just very politely just laid out things that they had concerns about and why, and specifically... And I wasn't this person's, like, direct supervisor, but I was, like, the two above that. And so I really appreciated it because it gave me the opportunity to come around and coach my direct reports better. And so I'm saying this employee did a great thing. They managed up.
Yep.
They helped me see things that I wasn't seeing before. So I'm guessing you were probably doing stuff like that as well at the time, which is really smart.
And kudos to that employee. Yeah. It's also very courageous.
It is.
It is. It's very courageous. And I do find that everybody has blind spots for the most part, even though the book really talks about investing in your development areas, everybody has opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think what the book helped me do early in my career, because again, you're talking undergrad, first corporate role, there's a lot of uncertainty about should I go here, should I go there, and trying to have conversations that will give you direction on what path to pursue is a really good place to focus and be.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going back to that story. It's like, one, it was really brave of that employee. And then, because they don't know. They didn't know. They had to trust me to do the right thing. I could have gone back to their supervisor and been like, so-and-so just threw you under the train.
Yes.
And I didn't. And so I'm not trying to say kudos to me, but I am saying there was trust built a little bit already in that relationship. And so for them to be brave, I am going to text my husband and have him make us another drink. How about that?
Hey, that's a great call. This is what we need. We need a bell. We need a bell or a flare that we can shoot off when the glasses run low.
Yeah. So let me just do that real quick.
I'll hit this while you're texting. One of the things they talk about in the book is like the categories of talent. And it was striving, thinking, and relating. And striving was really focused on the why, like what drives a person to do certain things. The thinking was, I took it on the technical side, which is how does one rationalize their decision making. And then the last one was relating, which has to do with who does the person trust, who do they engage, and who do they confront.
Yeah.
And so in your case, your talent was probably relating. So when that person came in, you were able to really relate with them, establish that trust.
Yeah.
So they could spill the beans.
Yeah, they did. Let me go to some of the questions. What do you know about Marcus Buckingham? Do we know anything about him?
To be honest with you, I didn't know anything about him when I read his book the first time, which is funny because, like, you'll probably appreciate this. Sometimes things are drawn to you and sometimes you're drawn to things. I don't know which one, but I'm thankful that it happened because I think it really helped to kickstart this journey that I've been on for the last 20 plus years. But I know that he's launched several books. One, First Break All the Rules. He launched, how to find, it's like a strength finders focus.
First discover your strengths.
Yes.
That's what it is, yeah.
Yes, and then he just learned another one that I haven't read yet. It was like Work Plus Love. I'm like,
Like for relationships?
No, I think it's about finding work that you love.
Oh, okay.
Because there is this certain amount of passion that I think you have to have for what you do if you're going to achieve greatness or aspire to be great. And I think that's, especially in the U.S., sometimes the struggle is people thinking, like, does my talent pay? Because sometimes people have to forego the investment in their talent because they got to put. I think that's a myth in terms of you can be whatever you want to be. It's nah. You can be what you work towards, and even you work toward it, it's not guaranteed. So I think level setting the reality is helpful. But then also there's a whole slew of people that have gone all in on their talent. And yeah, maybe it didn't pay the first year or the second year or the third year, but eventually it did pay off for those individuals. Yeah. But it takes commitment, it takes sacrifice, and it does take awareness of what your talent is. Yeah. And they do say, like, anything done at excellence can make you a superstar. And I think in our digital age, we've really seen that happen for creatives and podcasters and people that have these, like, very niche talents, but they go all in on them. Yeah. And every talent probably has a community of people that aspire to have that. Yeah. And they'll never be great, but they're comfortable being better than they were before they got introduced to this talented individual.
Yeah, well, and I think there's something really rewarding about honing in on your talents and your skills, even if you're not getting paid for it. But it is, at the end of the day, I often think about, I don't want to get too deep, but I think about the end of my life a lot. And here come our drinks. Come in.
There it is. Garçon.
Thank you.
Hey, so I don't know this to be true, but this might be the only podcast where they serve you live.
Did you smoke these?
Oui.
And they speak French.
Oh, they speak French. Oh, and so we didn't even talk about the drinks. So this is a smoked old fashioned.
You
right?
got it.
Yeah.
Some good bourbon, bitters, simple sugar.
I think I did bullet. And you have to have a rye whiskey.
You can.
I learned all of this today at the ABC store.
Hey, you did a great job, by the way. And I am totally a rule breaker on cocktails and old fashioned. As long as you have some bourbon, it doesn't have to be rye. Some bitters, simple sugar. And I always mispronounce the cherry. Amamina is a particular cherry that you have.
They're like fancy maraschino.
Yes, fancy. That's what we're going to go with. And fancy maraschino, little orange squeeze and zest.
But you introduced us to smoking it today.
Yes. And a great example of that is taking it back to the book. We all have these talents and abilities. And what we did with these is we actually infused them with smoke. Yeah. And so, like, we're all humans. We all have talents and abilities. But we also have something special about us. And, like, that's where you can, with a smoked old-fashioned, depending on if you smoke it with cherry, oak, hickory, you can add that special sauce. And it's pretty cool when you break out a torch and...
It was pretty cool. I hope I got a good enough picture to share with everybody. But this would be a lot of fun in the wintertime.
Oh. Please don't get me started, because that is definitely what we do around the fire pit. I do notice that talent, ability, and alcohol consumption go in two different directions. Like, the more old-fashioned you have, the less your ability to demonstrate your talent becomes. Yeah. I think that was a footnote in the book. I think...
That was more research that they did. Yeah. It's probably true. But yeah, a little moderation on a Saturday afternoon.
I think it's a good call.
Yeah, and I think work hard, play hard is how I like to live.
You know what I wanted to ask you after I listened to a couple of your sessions? Like, I wonder how authors, I guess they know their work is good work, but I wonder how many times they realize that their work is transformational work for the reader.
I don't know. I don't think they know unless somebody tells them, unless somebody reaches out and says, this changed my life.
When I went back and reread First Breaking All the Rules, I started to ask different questions to that point. I wonder what Marcus was thinking as that book was unfolding. Yeah. Because, again, it's a good blend of the frameworks. It's a good blend of the data for credibility. But he also weaves it in with a lot of short stories relate
Yeah.
to the user.
Yeah.
But I wonder, being a researcher, if that was the direction that he was going, or somebody was like, hey, look, man, this can't just be all data and questions. We're going to need some case studies.
Yeah.
We're going to need some a little bit extra.
Absolutely. It's just, you can't, academics love to put their white papers out. And I'm sure there's a lot of librarian academics who I love, but it's not interesting to everybody. We need the story. We need you to explain to us why this is valuable, and really just hit home to that human nature a little bit. I don't know his background at all, actually, besides that he worked at Gallup at the time, and that he worked with another, Kurt Kaufman was his co-author.
I wonder how Kurt feels about that, because nobody ever mentions Kurt. Shout out to Kurt.
Shout out to
You're out there,
we
man.
see you, Kurt.
Hey, let's raise a glass.
To Kurt.
Yes. Hey, Kurt, the checks are coming, so you don't have to.
Yeah, no, Kurt's probably doing just fine.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. I'm just thinking, going back to what he was thinking, I wonder if he knew his book would, one, stand the test of time.
Yeah.
Like when he put the pen down or the typewriter down or read the draft, did he go, man, this is going to be it?
Yeah.
Or did he just offer it up to the universe to be the judge?
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the second you do anything and you're like, this is going to be it, the universe will find a way to tell you it's not.
Agreed. My wife said, how are you feeling? I said, humble. I think if you go that route, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah. So I don't know, but it is, I think it is like a book that's impacted a lot of people. And I have to tell you, so rereading this and preparing for this podcast, I did not remember a lot of the stuff that I talk about as a manager, as I'm like, oh, you totally internalized things from this book, and I've used them. I just forgot where I got it from.
Yes. I was doing that same trip down memory lane. Mm-hmm. And when I did that, I said, wow, I probably need to brush up on this book more often.
Yeah.
Because I definitely self-reflected and said, hey, there might be some things on those 12 questions that you've drifted away from, or you probably need to bring more forward in your leadership style, especially as we become more fluid in the challenges that we face due to technology and transformations, which is where I focus, become more frequent. It's easy to lose the human side of leadership, especially in this virtual world where connection is not as easy. And I don't mean, hey, let's hop on a call and look at each other in the face.
Yeah.
Those water cooler conversations over the course of several months or several years, they add up. Where now it's 30-minute meeting with somebody dropping off at 25, and so you don't get those moments. So I think as leaders, that intentional connection and carving out the space is really important. Which is where I did read that book has turned actually into a college level course that they teach now, which I think is kudos to Marcus and what he was looking to accomplish. But also I'm going, like, I did some digital sourcing, and I saw that as recent as this year, people were still doing book summaries on First Breaking All the Rules. So I was like, oh, man, that's so cool that content that's created so long ago is still actually getting refreshed through the audiobooks or even through people's interpretation. I saw a couple of illustrations where they had taken his concepts and tried to, I think, storyboard them in a way to make them more digestible. And so I wanted to ask you, like, how are you in your profession and in your focus as things become more condensed, more TikTok based? How do you think that's impacting reading as a capability or interest for folks coming up?
Actually, the data shows that Gen Z and millennials visit the library and are reading more paper than the generations older than them. I think there is a shift back. I think there is. I'm very in the water. I live, breathe this all day. And so I often, and I read Kindle. I have my Kindle and I do audiobooks. I do it all. But a lot of people say, I just like the paper book. I just like that.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
I was transported because I still have the original book.
Oh, yeah.
that I have just a library of business books, many of them highlighted. So it's very easy for me to catch up prior to this podcast. But as I turned the page, as I read those stories, as I looked through those questions, I could go back in time. And I think that's some of the power of good literature is that wherever you are, it can transport you either to that place in the book or to that time when that reading really connected with you. So I don't know that I would have gone there if we didn't have this discussion. My wife asked me, well, how are you feeling? I was like, man, I'm humbled to be on the podcast, and hopefully I don't blow the whole thing up and get it shut down. But I also felt really positive because I remember going, hey, this might not be the right way, but at least I now have a way.
Yeah, and to do it your way and to know who you are, and now to see it on the other side of it as this young man that I was then. Look at all the steps that he took, trying to do the right thing, trying to grow himself, and look where you are now.
Hey, I'm on the podcast. We winning, baby.
So anyway, I loved rereading as well. Like I said, I read in school, and it just, I will say this, one of the things that they talk about is don't focus on your employees' weaknesses, you focus on their strengths. And like I said, I don't know, I knew I didn't come up with the idea myself, but I definitely have given this advice to people I supervise, because I have, once again, somebody, no names, and they kept coming to me and they said, why can't my staff be this? Why can't they do it the way I would do it, or would do it? And I said, they're never going to. You can't expect them to be all many versions of you. They're all individuals. And so you have to figure out where they fit best and who can help the others and all that. And so
one of the 4 keys was focus on outcomes.
Yeah.
And it talked about in the book, and again, this is coming back to times that are relevant now, because the generations now, they don't want to be micromanaged.
Right.
They don't want you to tell them how to do it. They want you to create an open door that if they have questions about the how, but what they really want to know is, like book says, focus on outcomes. What is the outcome that you want me to achieve? You hired me to do a job. You should trust me to get the job 100%. Done. And you should create an environment, if I feel uncertain, I can step forward. And I think that is such a freeing leadership style.
Yeah.
But then it does put you in a position when it talks about selecting for talent. It might mean that instead of hiring somebody in 30 days, you end up waiting 6 months for the person that has the right experience with the right talent that you can trust to achieve the right outcome. So it's still relevant today as it was when I was an undergraduate trying to just find my way.
But I think, like you said, it definitely does not promote a micromanagement life
at all. But it also does. It also talks about accountability. Yeah. And as a leader, like, you have to know if somebody either doesn't have the right talents, aren't bringing the right talents forward, having those difficult, I wouldn't even call them difficult if you've established trust, but just having those transparent conversations so that way people can know where they stand and then make the right calls. I've been in those discussions, and what's beautiful about those is I've seen so many times where the person knew they didn't have the right talent for the role, but they were just waiting for somebody to be courageous enough to tell them. And then they go off and go back to school, and they go to VCU, and they get their masters in art, and now they're building installations and murals in downtown when they never should have been in finance in the first place. They just did it because, like me, they committed to a path early and didn't want to disappoint their parents, and so they just stayed with it despite their amazing talent in these other areas. And so I would say to anybody listening to this, what is your talent? How can you bring it forward to make a difference, and just give yourself that grace as you stumble your way through, like I did.
Beautifully said. Thank you. So who would you recommend this story for?
So initially I had this very compartmentalized way of thinking. However, through this conversation, I would recommend the book to everyone.
Yeah.
And here's why. I think, similar to the situation that I was in, this book really can help you understand how you should be showing up, not at work. And this was probably what made it transformational. Many of these business books should really just be labeled life books, because the majority of the things that they cover, they apply to your day-to-day. Like, do you make your family feel included? Does your spouse feel a sense of belonging?
Yeah.
Are you cultivating trust within your kids?
Right.
Are you bringing your talents forward? Like, in your friendships?
Yeah.
Are folks, like, are you in the wrong fit? Because sometimes we keep friends around that we should probably cut, and some people should probably cut us.
You have frenemies.
Yes, exactly. So one, I would probably just start by saying, I think everybody would enjoy this book. I think it's a really good read. I think for young professionals, it can be a game changer.
Yeah.
Because it really does demystify how, one, your leader should be showing up, and how, two, even if you're an individual contributor, you can be cultivating capabilities that will put you leaps and bounds
right.
ahead
Just
of
like
your peers.
You did.
Just like I did.
Right.
And I think for current people leaders, like I think we were both talking about, like, revisiting the book, Stephen Covey, Sharpening the Saw. It's like, this book is a good sharpening the saw. Even if you just jump on YouTube and watch a couple of short snippets, it will help you go, yeah, I am doing it the right way. But Mikey, you'll probably go, I could probably tighten up in a few areas as well, which is where I think it really stood out to me that even close to 20 years later, I could still find value in a reread. And I think that's what makes some books more valuable than others. When I read it again, do I get a new experience?
Yeah.
And I think I got that through this podcast promoting me to blow the dust off that thing.
Yeah. Good. I'm so glad. And same for me. And I think I definitely had the experience. I was like, I was like reading it. I'm like, yeah, we're doing it. I'm like, oh.
Question 8.
Yeah. All right. To my staff, I will do better next week.
And you know what I was thinking? In my mind, I'm going, man, how can we introduce this in my organization? I'm like, how do I bring this up in some type of training curriculum? Just as a way of just introducing it. So maybe I just leave it on my desk when people walk by. They go, what you reading? Again.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, there's all kinds of sorts of ways you could bring it up, but
inspire others. I like it.
Raise a glass. Thank you so much, Ira.
Can we cheers in the mic?
Yeah. Cheers. That was fun. Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.